Good day and welcome to the Angus Report. I'm your host, Clint Mefford. Join us this week for the latest cattle news and education. This week we take a look at the U.S. beef export market. Angus GS is a tool that helps breeders accelerate breeding progress, and we learn about Dr. Dave Hawkins' significant contributions to the cattle industry in the new Am Angus Documentary, The Art of Greatness. This is the Angus Report. 2018 was a record year for beef exports. Dan Hallstrom, President and CEO of the United States Meat Export Federation, explains the driving force behind the $8.33 billion in global sales.
The exciting thing about it is that really it's broad-based growth across virtually all markets, led by Korea last year, which was up 45% off of a record the previous year, so we're pretty excited about that. If you break it down, and this is not including hides, it's about $320 a head of every animal is attributable to exports, and the number one market being Japan, which is about $80 a head. The NAFTA countries, Canada and Mexico, are another $70 a head. So you can see, but that, like I said, the interesting thing is the growth has been broad-based across most of the markets.
He also discusses the difference between being present first in a market versus being there effectively.
First helps, but being there effectively is probably more important. And for example, in December, it was announced that there's a renewed access into Morocco. And Morocco is a relatively small market, but we're going to start out with a significant duty-free quota that over time emerges into full access. And I think in that case is a good example where being first makes sense, because there is a demand in a lot of these markets for high-quality beef, grain-fed beef, where price is not necessarily the most important concern. Quality is probably first, especially for that high-end food service segment. So, yeah, in some regards, certain markets being first is important, but being effective in all markets is probably more important.
Hallstrom reiterates that the U.S. is most certainly not the cheapest option for foreign markets.
No, and nor do we want to be. I mean, you know, I kind of define success in a market when you're able to talk about the quality and the specifications and availability. These are questions that are first, and price comes after that. Then I think that defines success, because by definition, a place like China, where there's probably 50 suppliers globally of beef, the U.S. is undoubtedly the highest priced, and you got Indian buffalo meat, the lowest price, and everything else in between. So, yeah, this is what you're dealing with, but really, like I said, you don't want to be the lowest priced, and by definition, being a higher price with better quality is the goal. Beef variety meats are a huge export item category, and that's probably the best example. So, yeah, putting the right cut in the right market. For example, Japan, virtually every Japan-eligible plant that's able to export will be exporting their tongues to Japan for yakiniku. Tongues are worth $5 a pound in Japan. If you were to go here with all the tongues, you'd be well under $1. So that's $12 a head just on a tongue. Tripe to places like Peru and Mexico and to Brazil. You know, we're a lot of demand for tripe. Beef lips. Virtually every lip harvested goes to Mexico, and it brings it over $1.50 a pound. So, yeah, what we do and what the industry, the packers and the exporters do is they're looking for the right cultural fit for the right product, and then we match it up accordingly.
He also points out Africa's potential to be a significant importer of U.S. beef.
Yeah, Africa, I had the pleasure of being involved on the ground floor when we started our research there 4 or 5 years ago. And it's really, it strikes me that it looks a lot like Mexico did in the mid-'80s. Kind of a scary market, credit and financing and cold chain and all this are scary. But we're seeing signs of the market developing, and it's 1 billion plus people on the continent, one of the youngest demographics in the world, and we're starting to see that middle class emerge. And today, 4 or 5 years ago, there was zero business going from the U.S. Today, it's our third, fourth largest market on variety meats, mainly livers and kidneys and things like this. But we're starting to see muscle cuts go in, even on a chilled basis, for very high-end HRI restaurants into Ghana and Angola. So this looks to me, like I said, what Mexico looked like 30-some years ago. So my guess is that Africa is not going to take 30-some years to develop. It's going to develop much quicker And I think you're going to be hearing a lot more about it in the near future. The main thing is we want people to know the value opportunity from exports. I mean, sure, it may require some additional work, maybe some additional requirements, but the $320 a head speaks for itself on the opportunity. And I think the most important thing is not only is it an opportunity today, but that opportunity, I think, just grows over time.
Stay tuned. We'll be back with more Angus Report after a break.
Welcome back to the Angus Report. American Angus Association members wanting to participate in the electoral process and other business at the 2019 Annual Convention of Delegates need to meet 3 eligibility requirements before 4:30 p.m. Central Daylight Time on April 5th. Those 3 requirements are: have active regular or life membership with current dues paid, be 18 years of age or older, have registered at least 1 animal or complete at least $250 worth of business with Association or Angus Genetics Incorporated within the last 12 months from when the nomination period begins. According to association bylaws, only eligible voting members can nominate, be nominated, vote, or be elected in the annual election of delegates. The 136th Annual Convention of Delegates will take place Monday, November 4th during the National Angus Convention in Reno, Nevada. The May 1st deadline to apply for Angus Foundation scholarships is fast approaching. Each year, the Angus Foundation offers scholarships to undergraduate and graduate students to help them achieve their higher education goals and offset the continually rising cost of tuition. Applicants must be a graduating high school senior or enrolled at a junior college, 4-year college, university, or other accredited institution, and have a minimum 2.0 GPA. Visit angusfoundation.org for a full list of scholarships, eligibility requirements, and application guidelines.
We check in now on the latest cattle market news with the Cattle Facts Update.
Hello and welcome to the Cattle Facts Update. I'm Patrick Linnell. Winter may be dragging on, but the beef cutout is cooking. Wholesale beef prices, when looking at the USDA composite cutout, have traded at or above year-ago levels for all but 1 week so far in 2019. The recent high for the cutout was near the mid-220s on a weekly average basis, several dollars higher than the March peak last year. Not too bad, considering the levels of beef and competing meat production. Beef and poultry production have been running large, and pork production is at record levels, up 4.5% year-to-date. As a result, wholesale beef demand looks firm. This is no surprise, considering that retailers appear to be leaning on beef to drive foot traffic to the retail meat case, with a strong portion of fresh meat ads favoring beef. Furthermore, the February USDA all-fresh retail beef price was quoted 22 cents stronger than last year at $5.74 per pound. Given its performance so far, the cutout appears well on track to follow the seasonal pattern in the near future. Following the recent high, the cutout is expected to soften in the coming weeks, finding a short-term low in April. After a pause in April, the cutout tends to push to a new spring high. This is driven by improved demand as temperatures warm across the country and summer grilling demand fires up. Fed cattle supplies and beef production also tend to be at relatively modest levels during this time frame. Now, demand is tough to forecast, but the most recent trend is often the best indicator. Assuming demand remains constant with the first 3 months of the year, the cutout will find a spring high in the lower 230s area per hundredweight on a weekly average basis. This would be about $5 over last year's spring high and bodes well for beef demand in this time of expansion. For the Angus Report and Cattle Facts, I'm Patrick Linnell.
To learn more about Cattle Facts, your leading source for beef industry market information, visit cattlefacts.com.
Next on the Angus Report, we learn about the only genomic profile built specifically for Angus cattle. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Angus GS, the only genomic profile test specifically designed for Angus cattle, is an affordable tool that empowers genomic selection for Angus breeders and accelerates breeding progress. Stuart Bach, the Vice President for Agrogenomics at Neogen Corporation, explains why producers should consider Angus GS for their genomic testing.
We did a couple of things with the Angus GS product. Number one is we made sure that we filled in any blanks. There were 8 previous products had identified there were regions of the genome that we did not have any genetic markers in there, and so it was very difficult for us to track the inheritance of those sections of the chromosome. And if there were genes that were important in economically relevant trait, we were having a hard time tracking the inheritance of those from generation to generation. So we filled those gaps in, and the other thing that we did was we filled them in with content SNPs that were maximally informative that we would be able to use for future research. And one of the items that we focused on were regions of the genome that we knew were going to be associated with key economically important traits like fertility. And so we had regions of the genome that we were suspicious might be influencing heifer pregnancy and so on. So we saturated those areas with lots of genetic markers. As Angus breeders then began to genotype animals, we could use those genotyped animals together with their phenotypes and investigate the impact of those regions on heifer pregnancy, for example. So what we're doing is we're taking a snapshot of that animal's DNA, and we're comparing it to all of the other animals' DNA, and using that comparison, we're able to assign a merit or an estimate of EPD, essentially. We are able to assign an EPD that allows us to be able to predict the future genetic potential of that animal, from one day of age. In fact, I would also tell you that we have lots of people who genotype embryos. So these are people that are genotyping, embryos and collecting 8 or 9 cells out of a developing embryo. So we're getting a full genetic prediction, really, almost at the time of conception. Along the way, in addition to having a great tool for research, we just happened to save the Angus breeders about $1.5 million in the past year, so that's good. Now that's spread amongst all the members that submitted samples for the Angus GS, but that is a significant cost savings, and over the years, as we've been involved in this, we've seen that as the cost of acquisition of technology comes down, adoption comes up, and to a very large extent now, at $37, many Angus breeders look on that and say, well, that's an investment I can make if it gives me accurate insight into the true genetic merit of these animals. And the acid test, and the one thing that I was watching for was how did breeders respond in terms of genotyping females? Because everybody sees the value of genotyping the bull that influences, hundreds and hundreds of progeny. But do you see the value of genotyping a female? Because you won't get very many calves out of her in her lifetime, but if you do that right, you will build cow families that perpetuate the positive genetics that you want. And those cow families will produce the bulls that will drive the breed for the future. And that really is the piece that, frankly, from my perspective, was what was so exciting was, we challenged Angus breeders to do it. We gave them the opportunity for a product that was priced appropriately, and I'm happy to say that they responded, and not only did they genotype the animals, but they also captured the phenotypes as well. So, my comment to Angus breeders is, if you're not on this, rocket ship, or if you're not on this bullet train that represents genetic improvement and genomic advancements, you're starting to fall behind a little bit, and it's going to be more and more difficult for you to compete in the future without being engaged in and involved in these new technologies. And they're not, there's nothing magical about them. This isn't, behind the curtain, the Wizard of Oz stuff. This is just, this is just us understanding DNA and us understanding how that DNA gets transmitted from one generation to the next and results in, the kind of traits we need for the Angus breed for the future. but there's also a component of this business which is collaboration around the development of these tools for the future, and really both teams. So it's AGI bringing the voice of Angus breeders, the insight into the genetic evaluation, and it's my team up in Lincoln at GeneSeek and Neogen Corporation who are bringing insight into the laboratory methods, into how to design these chips, which SNPs to choose, and those kinds of things. And when you see teams that come together and nobody has any agendas other than let's make the best product that we can for the benefit of Angus breeders, it's just amazing what can get done. And this is a real case in point. If nobody's looking for credit, everybody gets credit.
Up next, we view the new I Am Angus documentary. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Angus Report. Dave Hawkins began his 50-year career in 1969 at Michigan State University. While there, he served in many capacities, including teacher, mentor, livestock judging team coach, and purebred livestock show judge. He's contributed largely to the worldwide livestock industry, but perhaps his most significant contribution lies within the students he has mentored and inspired over the years.
Dave Hawkins is a great man that has really made a difference in the livestock industry, not only through the United States, but around the world.
A true leader, a true visionary. Instrumental in evolving our industry.
A true teacher.
Truly a great man.
He is good at communicating with people, and he expresses himself with his hands, but I've often noticed that people who are a bit private often are people who express themselves with their hands lower and closer to their bodies. This is a position I often saw his hand, ready to use it and explaining something, but kept close.
My parents graduated from high school during the Depression, and they had desire to go to college. My dad wanted to be an engineer, and Mother wanted to be a teacher. And then she and my dad decided that their life was going to be together, and so they got married. And she worked on the farm with my dad. Because they had not had the opportunity to go to college, it was really important for them to provide the educational opportunity for us to do that. It was never if you're going to college, it was when you go to college. So I was really the first one out of our family to attend university. It was a challenge to start out with initially because I basically had grown up in Southwest Ohio. Nobody else had gone before me, and was I really going to be smart enough to be competitive? We started to have a little bit of success, both from a grade standpoint and also from an opportunity standpoint on being on judging teams. That gave me the confidence to continue on. Originally, when I went to college, plans were to go back home and farm with my dad. And then the reality set in that there probably was not going to be enough income from that farm to be able to support two families. And so then I started to look at different career alternatives. The fear that you have is that you're going to embarrass yourself or embarrass your family or be a failure. We had faculty there whose primary mission was teaching, and I learned so much from them, and I was inspired by them and decided that if I had the opportunity, I would like to follow that path. I came here in 1965 and started in on a PhD program. Michigan State was a place that was really on the rise trying to change the industry. A lot of the credit goes to Ron Nelson because he was the one that had the vision of what he wanted Michigan State to be. We had a lot of visitors coming to Michigan State in the early 70s to see what was new and different and kind of on the cutting edge. And that really opened up some opportunities for me to travel around the country to judge shows.
He did a lot of judging
back in the days when there was some mighty changes taking place in the beef industry. And he had a lot to do with helping change cattle to more profitable kind than we had back in the 50s and 60s.
Number of students like myself that was attracted to Michigan State University because of the nationally and world-renowned genetics that were there, that were all put together under Dr. Hawkins' watch.
So I had the opportunity then to start advising students and assuming the leadership for the teaching program there. I had some really good role models at The Ohio State University. You can never repay those people for what they did, except if you try and pay it forward. And so after I got in a position where I was an instructor and professor, I felt it was my responsibility to do the very best job I could of mentoring the next set of students to come along. The college experience gets to be a very challenging one for many people. And some of the very best and most profitable people are those that maybe had to struggle a little bit, that in the end they come out and they become the county agent that has the biggest impact in his region of the state. So you have to feel kind of good about that, because they could have been just floundered and cast aside, and I don't believe in that.
I'm Janine Schweiofer. I'm the Meat Quality Extension Educator with Michigan State University Extension. So I have a guest, my undergraduate advisor, Dr. David Hawkins, is in the back. Dave has had a tremendous influence on my life. He was one of the first faculty that welcomed me as a freshman in animal science and made me feel at home and made it really feel like family in the department. He was really good at that. And he knew the details about life for you, struggles that you might be going through.
If I can develop a relationship where they gain confidence in me, then I can then step in their shoes and help them a little bit. I try and do that.
Watching that and learning from his mentorship has helped me to become a mentor to others.
My biggest impact has been on helping students. That'll have more lasting effect than some of the other things that occur. You know, you can have an outstanding herd of cattle and then at some point you disperse them and the industry moves on. But the impact that you make with people can go on and on and on and on. I think I've been good, and it's for others to decide whether I'm great or not.
They put him up on a pedestal, and I think that's very, very remarkable that somebody who makes such a quiet statement can have such a powerful influence on other people.
The most common thing I heard from people in relation to the portrait was that the eyes in it should speak as they do in the real person. Someone said to me that they had an inquiring look about them. Others described them as caring, welcoming, compassionate, and humorous. The overwhelming consensus was that they should emit in the portrait kindness and wisdom. I wanted this painting to resonate with the old saying, still waters run deep. And I wanted to show a beaming light coming out of that quiet and deep place.
Well, you know, I really value the humility and leadership that Dave Hawkins embodies. And that's a wrap for this week's Angus Report. Tune in next week for industry-leading news and education. And be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Angus TV, for more highlights from the association. We'll see you next week.